Hi, this is Garrett Gunderson, New York Times bestselling author of Killing Sacred Cows. And although that's a financial book, one thing that I found with everyone is that if they don't take care of their health, none of the money matters. I've seen people that work their whole life saving, scrimping, doing everything they can to live those golden years. But when they get there, they're so busy taking care of their health, or they have 2 years where all their money gets exhausted because they go into a nursing home. Now, we're not talking about finances, but we're talking about one of the things that impact finances the most. Because if you look out there in the world, there's more epidemics, there's all this so-called reform that needs to take place when it comes to health because there's just so much sickness, there's so much obesity, and there's plenty of misinformation. So we're going to get to the heart of the matter here. I've got Dr. Steve Ranicki, and he's going to talk about through his own personal experience, through his own personal story. And this is a guy, when you talk about level of education, when you talk about study, and that is really a guy known for results and really finding out whatever it takes to get someone healthy. I mean, working with people from anything to kids on the spectrum with autism to just people that are healthy and that want to maintain that wellness. Those are probably the smartest people that he works with. So, Dr. Steve, good to have you here today. Looking forward to this interview.
Great being with you, Garrett.
I mean, and really your background's kind of interesting because as a kid, you were, popped full of pills and you weren't even, out playing with other kids because allergies and sickness and you name it, you kind of went through it. But that kind of led you on this journey to becoming a doctor. So let's start with some of that background and how that, discovery took place.
Right, yeah. I knew I was going to be a doctor from a very young age. Probably about 4 years old, my father looked at me one time and said, "Son, you need to become a doctor because you need the discount." And, at 4 years old, that just makes a lot of sense. So it was just a question, I think, of what type of doctor I was going to be. But yeah, about 4 years of age, I was just allergic to everything they could test me for, except for the big three. I wasn't allergic to bee stings, shellfish, or peanuts.
Everyone else is allergic to that, but you. Nice.
Right. But, milk, dog hair, every pollen, dust, dander, anything you can name like that. I couldn't have any milk in my cereal. I had to always eat my cereal dry. I couldn't sit by my friends in class because I had to hide from the dust registers.
Wow.
In the afternoons when I'm finally done with school, instead of going outside and running playing with the other kids, I got to sit inside in the basement, hiding from all the different pollens and grass and things like that would get me just itching and scratching and having a fit. And again, I probably spent 3 to 4 afternoons every week in a doctor's office anyways, going in for allergy shots. When I was 8, I finally started to develop asthma, so now I'm in there again for breathing treatments. And I seem to have this constant infection. Never went away. It just moved from my sinuses to my chest, to my throat, to my sinuses, to my chest. And every cut, scrape, anything like it ever got, always got infected. I just have such a vivid memory in my childhood of sitting there with knees and elbows soaking in little bins of Epsom salts.
Epsom salt.
Yeah, because we didn't have the Neosporin and stuff like that just yet. So we're always dealing with some sort of infection. So I was a really, really sickly kid, without a doubt the sickest kid in my class every year. And when I was 10 years old, a friend of my mother's had just graduated from chiropractic school, and he's passing through town and stays with us overnight. And she starts talking to him about what's going on with me and says, "Is there anything that you can do to help with my son? Because he's just so sick all the time. We've got him on so much medicine. He lives on Benadryl and allergy shots. And nothing is really making a difference, right? It's making it to where he can tolerate it, but it's not getting rid of anything. He's not getting any healthier for it. And is there anything else you can think of?" So he takes a look at me and he checks me out and he notices that I got a scoliosis. And if you don't know, the scoliosis has got to be pretty bad, really, before you can see it without an x-ray. It really takes an x-ray to pick up on a minor scoliosis, so mine must have been pretty nasty, I can imagine.
Yeah.
And so he tells my mother, "Look, I'm going to adjust him tonight. This will not only help his spine, but it's also going to help his nervous system, which will in turn then help his immune system. And so I'll take care of him tonight, but you really got to get him to start seeing somebody here in town on a day-to-day basis to try to make some difference here and to turn things around." So he takes care of me that night. I start seeing a chiropractor right down the road. I can't thank you enough, by the way, Dr. Eisenberg, if you happen to be watching. Changed my life. And within about 2 months, my asthma and my allergies were gone. And I don't mean like I never had another issue at all, but I mean instead of having to spend my afternoons hanging out with the nurses getting allergy shots and then being so groggy all the time from Benadryl, it was really just a minor nuisance. And instead of having to use my inhaler 20, 30 times a day, has anybody seen that thing anymore? I can't find it. It's been weeks since I needed it, right? And so it made such a tremendous difference in my health, not in how I felt pain-wise, but just in my actual health and wellness. by the time I was 12, I knew I was going to be a chiropractor, right? And I remember going through high school and nobody else knew what they wanted to be or where they were going to go for it. And I was like, guys, I can't understand this. I've had all this stuff figured out since I was 12. And I know exactly what I'm going to be doing. So that wound up getting me to be a chiropractor, and has kind of set the stage for my life ever since.
Well, in this interview today, we're going to get to what's going on out there. There's a lot of, people that work on symptoms. There's a lot of people that don't understand neurologically what you understand. We're looking at everything that's happening in the U.S. And ultimately, I'm going to tell you, you're going to learn some impactful things. And Steve has the ability to go into the detail. So you may not get all the detail today, and he may talk fast at times. So number one, if you stay till the end, I'll tell you how you get a copy of this video so you can watch it again and you can apply it to your life. And then second, he's going to offer a bonus that's $100 value for everyone that pays attention, and we'll tell you how you can redeem that at the very end. So what are the things that you want to get across to the viewers of this video before we finish the interview today?
Okay, so I guess one thing I would like to get across is, why are we in the pickle that we're in right now with health? I mean, everybody can, I think, universally agree we are experiencing worse health now than we ever have before.
Yep.
United States is ranked, and this is not new stats, this is old, outdated stats, but nonetheless, 37th healthiest country in the world. And before that, it was 15th, and before that, it was 12th. So given the trend, I imagine we're probably not even in the 30s anymore. It's
right.
Probably even worse. So 37th healthiest country in the world. And, we spend 5 times as much on healthcare as any other country out there in the world. And of course, healthcare has been such a huge topic here lately, right?
Sure.
So why are we in this bad shape? I'd say that there's 2 major reasons.
Okay.
Probably lots and lots of minor reasons, but 2 major reasons. Number one, first and foremost, we as a country are utilizing not a healthcare system very much, but rather a sick care system, right? So
Right.
commonsensically enough, if you went into your doctor and you said, Doc, I'm extremely healthy, I got great health, and I want to stay this way, what can you do to help me stay this way? I think that you would probably agree that by and large, you wouldn't get something that was really going to help too much. I mean,
Get a physical once a year, maybe, or something like that, yeah.
They'll talk about all of what they call prevention, which is in reality still a very good idea, but it's really early detection, right? So you get your prostate, your mammogram, things like that, and those might be a good idea, but they don't make you healthier. They just find sickness sooner.
Right, and then they might say, well, eat healthy and exercise.
Yeah.
But, do you really need to walk in there for that? Right?
Exactly, right? So we do have health care available in the United States, but most people are not utilizing anything that actually cares for the health that they already have. They're waiting until they've got a problem, and then finally you can get into that system. And don't get me wrong, Garrett, it's a great system. If you need it, definitely. It's got what you need.
Good sick care system.
Right, but it's care for once you're sick. And nobody would apply this to their car, right? Nobody would say, hey, it's real important that you change the oil, but not until the check engine light comes on, right? And you got to rotate the tires, but I wouldn't do it until one of them is finally blown.
Right.
We understand that because of doing the continuous tire rotations, oil changes, things like that, that we can really extend the life of our car. And the thing that has always seemed the craziest to me about that is that no matter how well you maintain your car, you're going to have to buy a new one anyways. It's just not going to last you your whole life. But your body is not going to last, any longer than you live.
Can't go trade that in.
Yeah, you can't just go upgrade. You're stuck with this one your whole life. Wouldn't it make more sense to put better care into that?
So that's part of the reason we're 37th. Any other reasons that the United States is so low?
Yeah, I would say that, it ultimately comes down to lifestyle choices and lifestyle issues, right? So when we look genetically at our ancestors, we are virtually identical to our ancestors as far back as 40,000 years ago. We have to go back to fossils we find 40,000 years old to find even a 0.2% difference in our genetics. So our whole body is built for living their life, yet we live such a radically different life. All right? Our diet is nothing like they would have eaten. It is so, of course, artificial, chemical,
processed,
things like that.
Yep.
Yeah, we've got a fast food hamburger in our office that all the patients love to see and talk about. It's over a year old. It's over a year old, and it looks identical to the day we bought it.
Right.
It's a little drier, but there's no mold, no mildew, no bugs are growing on and living on it. Nothing will touch it. It's not going to rot. It's not going to decompose. And another 30 years is going to look the same because it's so far removed from food, right? Food is supposed to break down and rot. And if it can't be broken down and rot, then your body can't absorb and utilize it
I
either.
saw a sign that said, organic food, what our parents used to call Food.
Right, exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
So those hunter-gatherer ancestors of ours, their diet was all organic, not because they paid so much extra money for it, but just because that's the way it was, right? Yeah, absolutely. And then, of course, the types of foods, not only the organicness of it, but those hunter-gatherers, they would not have messed with grains. They would have starved to death trying to grab enough grains to survive.
Right.
But if we look at our diets, it is a mainstay of our diets. You can hardly find a meal in a restaurant that's not based on breads or pastas or something like that. And we're being marketed to all the time about how much you need whole grains. The reality is, of course, what you need is fiber, but there's much better sources of fiber than whole grains.
Right.
So there's the diet aspect of it, then also activity, right? So we talk about exercise. Our hunter-gatherer ancestors never would have exercised. If they could all of a sudden see us now running in circles around a track, they would laugh hysterically, but they would have stayed active their whole time. There would have been no chair for them to sit on, a couch to plop down in front of, or a computer for them to spend all day in front of.
So we're not going to go move out into the wilderness or anything like that. So
No.
what are your suggestions, and how do we kind of start resolving some of that?
So obviously it's not really necessary to go into living exactly the way they lived, although sometimes it might be nice just to get away from it all. But there's a lot that we could be doing to improve upon the situation. Again, we could work on, can we grow some of our own fruits and vegetables and have access to some of the stuff that's freshest and that we can control the quality of? And of course, then we could just simply stay more active.
Right, like you were telling me about these European nations, right? They've got gardens. They actually ride their bikes somewhere, walk certain places. I was in Paris earlier, and it's like meals are 2 hours long, man. You're not in some rush to get out.
Yeah,
absolutely. It's a little different with the lifestyle.
Yeah, they considered, in France, want to understand, a meal is an experience to savor every possible sensation of, not something that you would ever consider doing while driving or hurry up and go because I got to get moving.
Right.
It's a conscious choice and a conscious decision to reduce the pace of life, not let it go so stressful, instead of letting your life run you.
Right. So a lot of this is about lifestyle. I mean,
Absolutely.
the amount of stress that we're facing, the chemicals that we're exposed to, the type of food that we're eating, how does that all impact us?
Well, all right. So, you live your life through your nervous system. Everything you ever think, say, do, experience, or express as a human is processed by your nervous system. And unfortunately, so many of the things in our current lifestyle that are so physically stressful, chemically stressful, and mentally stressful can become an overload for our nervous system. And we can start to develop, it's a protective strategy. It's something that we are wired to do on purpose, but nonetheless, that costs us a price, is we create what they call a subluxation. So picture in your mind something like a combination between a bad cell phone signal and a trip circuit breaker. It's like a bad cell phone signal in that the signal between your brain and some part of your body, and by the way, Garrett, a lot of people, if you ask them, what do your nerves go and what do they do, they're going to talk about arms and legs, and they control your muscles.
Right.
The reality, of course, is that every single piece and part of you is directly connected to your brain through your nervous system.
A lot of times they kind of think of it as like indicator of pain or something like that,
of course.
which a lot of that has nothing to do with that. And you've studied hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours on neurology.
Yeah, absolutely. Neurology is a particular area of specialization and emphasis of mine. So imagine, again, this bad cell phone signal, but between your brain and some organ or a system like your immune system, or certainly it could be between your brain and some muscle. And the signal gets scrambled, dropped, amplified, or distorted in some way, shape, or form, including, by the way, the information coming from the outside world into your brain, through your five senses, of course. What if you're not gathering that information quite accurately? So it's like a bad cell phone signal, but it's also like this trip circuit breaker in that it's something that we do on purpose as a protection. Just like in your house, a circuit breaker trips on purpose as a protection against an overload of what we could call electrical stress, power surges, lightning strikes, things like that. And when that circuit breaker trips, it protects your TV, your refrigerator, all your cool stuff, so you don't wind up having to go out and buy a new refrigerator every couple months. But it's only a good short-term strategy. I mean, it's really brilliant short-term strategy, but in the long term, the problem is that your food all still spoils. You still miss all your favorite TV shows. You can't get online to connect with all your friends on Facebook unless somebody goes out in the garage and resets a circuit breaker. And it's the same thing with these subluxations. They're a great short-term strategy. They protect us against these overloads of the physical stresses of life, like slips and falls and bumps and bangs, Although today's biggest one really is being too sedentary, spending too much time sitting instead of up and active and moving. Chemical stresses, like all that artificial stuff in those fast food hamburgers we were talking about.
Right.
And then the big one really is mental and emotional stress. And I think that's pretty self-explanatory. Everybody knows what I mean by that.
Yeah, but you know, it's interesting because you're talking about mental and emotional stress, which I don't think a lot of people fully relate that to how that's impacting their body and their overall health in the short term. In the long term, they maybe think about that, but you're not just talking about, oh, I hurt my arm, let me go get a pill. You're talking about there's these multiple components that make up your health, including how you're thinking and what your emotions are doing and how that starts to impact your body overall. And so if I get a subluxation, right, because it's the circuit's, you know, broke or whatever, so what do I do about that, and what does that ultimately mean if I don't do something about that?
Okay, well, let's start with that first. So if you don't do something about it, then of course, as that particular body part, whether it be an organ or a system or a muscle or something like that, as that becomes longer and longer disconnected from your brain, it's going to start to malfunction more and more and more. So now your immune system, instead of getting better and better at fighting infection with time and practice and experience, of course it gets worse. So you wind up getting ill more often, but it can actually wind up starting to turn against things that don't need to be fought, like all of those allergies that I used to have, right? It's just an immune system that's attacking things that don't need to be attacked. It could eventually sometimes turn against you. You can wind up with autoimmune disorders. So there's that aspect of it. Also, you wind up with degenerative changes. You know, a lot of times people equate things like arthritis with just getting old, but the reality is it doesn't have anything to do with getting old. You should be able to live to 120 some years without ever having any arthritis. Arthritis is rather the process that starts with either an injury or some sort of joint that's not moving the way it's supposed to, because again, maybe the brain can't communicate with the muscles to tell the muscles how to keep the joint properly aligned and properly moving. And so the joint wears unevenly, just like the tires in your car. If your car is not properly aligned, the tires wear unevenly. Because they're wearing unevenly, they tend to wear out a lot faster. And the same thing happens with our joints, right? Right. Except for instead of being able to just drive down to the tire shop and get a new set of joints thrown on, you're stuck with these for the rest of your life.
Yeah, I remember about a decade ago, I'm doing some running, my feet start going numb. And so I just was talking to someone else that was a runner, and he goes, oh, you need to go see this doctor. He's a chiropractor. He works with John Stockton and Carl Malone, because I'm out in Utah, and I'm like, cool, can I get an appointment? It wasn't but a month and a half, and I've never had that numbness since, because I went for regular care. I learned about, you know, what a subluxation was, and you know what some of the things that could be done about it, and it's made a massive difference. Right. That was probably, I think it was because of an ankle injury or something, like you said, that was out of place, and that communication stopped, and that communication now is flowing.
Absolutely, absolutely. So yeah, so if you have a subluxation, then the logical thing is, let's get it corrected by the chiropractor. Yep. Now, of course, the challenge that comes in is that so many of the things creating your subluxations are not something that happened just once recently, but either happened so long ago that there's already been a certain amount of damage, or it's something that continues to happen in your life day after day after day. Again, we're not going to be able to eliminate stress. This just doesn't work. You can't get away from it, unfortunately, unless we did decide to go live out in the wilderness. Right. But the stress is still there, so it can keep recreating the subluxation. And so a lot of people then will ask, well, then what's the point? You know, should I just kind of throw my hands up in the air and give up and say, well, I'm doomed with this?
I tend to exercise every day. Right. You know, I mean, it's like you don't stop doing that. I tend to eat every day. Exactly. I don't stop doing that just because I did it once.
Right, absolutely. So, you know, I like to use the analogy of you go to the dentist, they clean the plaque and tartar off your teeth, and you got now a nice, pretty healthy smile again, but tomorrow you got just a little bit of plaque and tartar in your teeth again. So again, do you throw your hands up in the air and say, well, what can I do? I can't beat it. Or do you just say, no, all I have to do is do this little minimal amount of care. I brush, I floss regularly, I go see the dentist a couple times a year, and it's all kept at a real manageable level to where it never starts to impact my life. It doesn't keep me from doing the things I want to do. And the same is true with these subluxations, that with just a little bit of maintenance care, you can keep them at either a manageable level or get rid of them altogether, so that it's not a constant, never-ending worsening problem.
One of the subtle things that you said that I think drives a concern for me as you talk about it is, okay, so, you know, if someone's experiencing arthritis, they should be able to be fine for, you know, like 120 years and not have that type of thing, but it's because of interference, because of subluxation. So basically, are you saying that, with you use the spoiled food analogy with the tripped circuit, that aging would, accelerate if there's subluxations?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So our bodies are constantly rebuilding and repairing themselves. In fact, every cell in your body is less than 10 years old. 90% of you is less than 1 year old, which begs the question then, why don't you feel like a 10-year-old or have the body of a 10-year-old? Well, it's because things can and do accelerate the aging process. So if there's not good communication between your body's inner intelligence and all those body parts, they're not going to be able to rebuild and repair as quickly and as fast and as often as they're supposed to. Or, yeah, you make new copies of the cells just as fast as you're supposed to, but they're kind of hodgepodge copies. They're not nearly as good. So instead of your skin cells looking all soft and supple and stretchy and elastic, they start looking all kind of tough and wrinkly and leather. I'm not trying to suggest that if you get adjusted, you'll have the body of a 10-year-old for the rest of your life. What I am suggesting is that you can, of course, slow down and reduce some of the effects of the aging process.
And so is there a lot of research around chiropractic? I mean, I know you're an ultimate researcher.
Yeah.
I mean, as far as reading and studying, I mean, when did you start finding out how much there was on chiropractic or what there is?
I do love to read research. It's kind of one of my unfortunate hobbies. I spend so much time hooked up to the internet looking at what's out there.
Good news for your patients, though.
Yeah, very good for the patients. Not so good for my social life. But one of the research studies that I've found that I've loved for a long time, I think it's one of the more powerful ones. Back in the 1970s, there was this PhD researcher by the name of Ron Perot. He used to be chief of cancer prevention at New York's Preventive Medicine Institute. Okay. And he started making a connection between certain types of problems with the nervous system and a higher risk of cancer. And so he said, hey, here's all these chiropractors. They're claiming that they can do something to help the nervous system. I want to put it to the test. So he designed a study where he looked at a chemical that our bodies produce that repairs damage to your DNA. It's called files, right? So the more files you make, the better and faster your body can repair DNA damage so that before the next copy of cells is made, we can correct the damage and not pass that on as a kind of a copy of a copy of a copy effect that we used to get. So he took 3 groups of people, one group of people that was actively receiving chiropractic care, another group that was not getting chiropractic care but was given a clean bill of health, and another group that actively was fighting cancer. And he gave all 3 of these groups a blood test and looked at their thiol levels, and then he gave all 3 of these groups a toxic burden. Basically, he made them drink some chemical cocktail that he knew would probably do some DNA damage, and then afterwards measured their thiol levels again. And what he found was that the group that was getting chiropractic care had a 200% greater increase in thiol levels than the group that was not getting chiropractic care but was healthy, and a 400% greater increase than the group that actively had cancer. So this indicates that getting chiropractic care really can boost your ability to protect your genetics, to protect your DNA. And his conclusion out of the whole thing was that chiropractic care simply optimizes your genetic ability to stay healthy and to resist disease and infirmity. And then just a few years ago, another group of chiropractors hired him and commissioned him to redo the study, but this time they said, we want one additional factor in there. We also want another group that's been getting chiropractic care for 5 years or more. And what they found was that that group had an even bigger increase in thiols than the other 3. So the longer they were getting it, the even bigger, better result they got.
What's interesting is, first of all, when my youngest son was born, he was pretty kind of colicky the first couple of days. I mean, very whining, crying, and I just said to my wife, let's take him in the chiropractor. And she was kind of like, he's a baby. I mean, why would we take him in the chiropractor? It only took one trip that she was like, okay, I'm sold, because it was like pretty immediate result of him stopping the crying. And part of that's obviously childbirth's pretty traumatic, and a lot of defense mechanisms, and shutting down on some of those things. What would you have to say about that?
Well, if you were going to try to pick me up, you'd of course have to use a certain technique and a certain amount of force. But if you were going to pick up your little one, you'd use a different technique and a different amount of force. And the same is true with adjusting somebody. I'm obviously not going to take some little small infant and put all the weight I've got in and just shoving into them. It's a real soft, gentle process. We're using literally ounces of force to adjust these little babies. I've adjusted babies who are literally minutes old. I was there for the delivery. I didn't help do the delivery, but I was there for it. And as soon as the baby was out, let them clean it all up, check to see if there was any problems that might have happened as a result of the birth process. Right. And by the way, think about what a subluxating situation that would be, right?
Yeah.
You're going from this dark, warm, moist, quiet, safe environment. You never met any other people. And all of a sudden it's getting dry and bright and cold and loud and you're being squeezed. And somebody, which you don't have any other concept of other people, but somebody is now grabbing you and holding you upside down and spanking you and sticking hoses and tubes. What a huge stress, right?
Yeah.
Not to mention, of course, all the force involved in the birth process. So we can check them sometimes just the very, very minute they're born. And again, we're using like pinky fingers, just ounces of pressure. So it's a totally different...
A lot less than bringing that baby into the world.
Yeah. Much, much, much less than the actual delivery process itself. But imagine being able to start life from minute one, being able to gather all the information about your world accurately rather than through this subluxated nervous system where it can be much more difficult to figure out what's really going on and how do I function and survive in this world when I can't make any sense of what's actually happening. So it's a very, very gentle, very safe thing. In fact, I think that more than anything else, the thing that communicates the safety of what I do is if you look at insurance premiums, right? Malpractice insurance premiums. So the average medical doctor, whether a general practitioner or a pediatrician or whatever, they're spending about $30,000 a year for $1 million worth of malpractice insurance. On the other hand, I spend $900 a year for $1 million of coverage. The same coverage, I only spend $900. I can't even drive my car around for $900 a year
Right.
in insurance, right? I think that says a lot about the safetiness of it.
And I know you work with some special needs kids as well.
Yeah, special needs kids are definitely one of my areas of passion and also, I would say, expertise. So all chiropractors, of course, care for the nervous system, but there is kind of a subset. Just like in medicine, you've got medical doctors that specialize in all these different areas.
Right.
Same is true in chiropractic. We've got different areas of specialization. So my area of specialization is in what we would call functional neurology, meaning that we've got the ability to say, all right, we know this particular part of the brain is responsible for these particular functions of the body, and let's see how well it does that. Can the brain make the eyes quickly jump from target to target, or can they make the eyes follow a moving target smoothly and not have to jump around trying to catch back up?
Right.
So we can look at all these different types of tasks and say that this one particular area on this one side is not working quite as well as it ought to. And now we can custom tailor the way that we adjust the person and also what kind of things we might have them doing outside of the office and in the office to try to keep driving and activating and stimulating that one particular part of the brain or nervous system to start kind of exercising it and building it up to where now it works just as good as the rest, right? So that's kind of the concept of functional neurology. I'm board eligible in both chiropractic neurology and in functional neurology, which are very similar. And I have 650 hours, postgraduate hours in those programs. So I've certainly put in a good bit of time with that sort of stuff. And what got me started down that path, by the way, is that I've also got a kid with special needs in my life. When I was a fairly new young chiropractor, I was taking care of a family at the practice that I used to work in, and they said, hey, we've got a son that we just found out has autism, and do you think there's anything that you might be able to do to help? And I said, well, I've not had really any experience with autism, but I know it's a problem with the nervous system, and we help the nervous system, so maybe, why don't we try? And he starts making improvements that he wasn't supposed to make. You know, their pediatrician had told them, at best, what they could hope for their kid was that maybe he might be able to pump gas someday. That was about the extent of it. Maybe he might be able to be a greeter at Walmart, but not to expect much. And all of a sudden, he starts regaining some of the language he had lost. Within a couple more months, starts linking words together and forming sentences. Of course, because he started developing typically and then regressed, he became very frustrated and very agitated with not being able to communicate his wants and needs anymore. So that turned into a lot of whining and hitting and aggressive tendencies towards like that. And those behaviors started to calm down and eventually went away. And so before too long, I'm becoming a closer and closer part of this particular family. And before long, by the way, he winds up becoming my nephew because I got introduced to one of his aunts. And now that he's a part of my family, I said, look, I've really, really got to get as far into this as I can to try to help him out. So I start getting involved more in this chiropractic and functional neurology world, trying to not only help him, but all of these other kids on the special needs spectrum that honestly are really struggling trying to find any kind of answer at all.
Right, and you're really a leading authority there, writing articles and giving insight and, you know, helping people in that arena and a place that, you know, people in your community really look towards because of those results. And you know, I know you might be a little bit humble about that, but just in the conversations I've had.
In fairness, of course, I'm studying under other much bigger, better brains than myself, but yeah, I've been able to take a lot
but you're
of what
applying it and
taken a lot of what they've done and figured out how to apply it and make some particular changes with these specific kids. So that's a significant part of my practice and an area that that I love, because honestly, Garrett, there's a lot of reward, of course, in taking somebody who hasn't been able to run for a while because their sciatica was bothering them and they get back to being able to run and start competing in races again. That's great and wonderful, but it just doesn't come close to when you take care of a little kid and they walk out to the car and all of a sudden the mother comes running right back in crying because her kid finally gave her a hug for the very first time in his entire life.
Yeah.
Or another time when they go out to the car and the mom comes right back in saying he finally said his first word. The kid is 2 years old and has never spoken, and he finally said hot because the car was hot. Right. You know, those kinds of things are pretty special, and they make it real easy to get up and get to work in the morning, no doubt.
Right. One of the things you say is that the smartest people that you know, though, are the ones that are already healthy, and that they continue to come in to see you, and that they're in your office. And that one of the things that you're really known for is that you have patients that stay with you for a long time because they do get committed to that wellness aspect, to that, hey, I want to keep life getting better and I want to continue to be healthy. I want to be able to have that energy and have that vitality and be able to play with the kids or be around for the grandkids or all those kind of things. And so talk a little bit about that philosophy.
So, I would say that wellness at its core really comes from, again, the best possible nerve function, meaning that the better your body can adapt to and change to your environment, the quicker and faster that your whole body can respond and that you can maintain the health that you've already got. So we all start off, I shouldn't say all, but most of us start off life pretty healthy, and so many of us find that we wind up losing it as time goes on, and then we start looking for answers. Well, this is a difficult process because a lot of times the answers either aren't there or we don't find out about them in time. And if we do find answers, they tend to be very, very expensive and sometimes don't give us quite as great a result as we hope for. But in the beginning, when we still have health, it's really quite easy to protect and to maintain that by living what we would call a wellness lifestyle. So certainly getting adjusted and protecting the nervous system from the effects of subluxation, that nerve interference, that's a big part of it. But we also spend a lot of time working with our patients on what's really the best way to eat and how's the best way to stay active and exercise, and those kinds of lifestyle strategies. That's a big part of the whole wellness equation there as well.
Right.
So much so that we've gotten involved in what we call the Creating Wellness Center, which is a group of, I guess they're probably up to about 350, if not 400 different practices around the country, all committed towards trying to help their community find higher levels of wellness. Again, not just sickness care, but keeping healthy people healthy in the first place. And of course, for those who have lost some degree of their health, trying to get that back there as well.
Rejuvenate that and get them back on track.
Yeah.
So you may be wondering as you listen to this, how do I apply this in my life? What can I do? First of all, I said that we're going to give you a link, and you'll see that link below here in just a second. That'll let you get access to this recording so you can watch it again and you can share it with other people, because part of health and wellness is sharing that lifestyle and that philosophy with other people that are important in your life. That's the same thing we found with finance. People that have those conversations with the people they care about get better results. But more importantly is really to tailor this to your situation, to come in and to meet with Dr. Steve Ranicki, and not just, come in and pay the normal price, but because you're being introduced to this, get a $100 discount is what you're offering for the first 25 people that take advantage of this. And by the way, you got to take advantage quick, because this isn't just going to be open offer, because there's a certain number of people that you can see in a certain amount of time you have. So take advantage of that in the next 24 hours. Make the phone call, click on the link, you'll follow the prompts, and make sure that you leave a message. If lines are, if lines are tied up and going straight to voicemail, if they're busy, make sure you call back. That's definitely key.
Yeah, absolutely. So I really want to make sure that we make it possible for everybody to find out if this is something that might help them to achieve some of the healthcare goals that they're looking for.
They're going to make a $100 investment. You're giving them a match. Every dollar they spend, you're matching their health.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, with the 100%.
Yep. Normally $200 for the initial consult exam and x-rays for me to be able to figure out, number one, can I help you? And if so, what do we need to be doing? How long will it take? What's it going to cost? All that kind of stuff. But instead of doing that for the normal $200, we're going to do that just instead for $100.
So what could they expect when they come in? You know, what is that meeting like? And, you know, what do they need to have prepared, and who's it for?
I would say that literally anybody under the age of Medicare. So this is something that I can't offer for Medicare people. We're not a Medicare provider, and by law, to care for Medicare patients, you have to be a Medicare provider. But anybody who doesn't have Medicare, certainly bring in the kids as well. No sense in taking good care of yourself, but leaving your kids at home to stay sick, right? That doesn't make a lot of sense, I don't think.
I mean, our kids in the last 2 years have not missed any school, have not been sick. And I got to tell you, the first 2 weeks we started really getting intense about chiropractic care. They started getting sick, and my wife's like, oh, what's going on? But I think it was maybe some of the, you know, detox and preparation. But I mean, our kids just have not gotten sick through this type of care, and also a focus on what we're feeding them, because that was a big aspect of what we had to transition with this philosophy you're teaching.
Absolutely. So during that first visit, what we'll do is we'll do an in-depth consultation. We'll talk about what's wrong. How's it affecting your life? What kind of things is it keeping or preventing you from being able to do? And just kind of what's the nature of your problem, what your particular goals are, what you want to try to achieve and accomplish. Then we'll get started doing an exam, whatever is, of course, appropriate for your particular problems. You know, if you come in and talking about how bad your feet are killing you, then we're probably not going to look in your ears. We're going to figure out, of course, what's necessary for your particular issues. But we've got some very cutting-edge technology for ways to measure and assess the nervous system, how well your body is currently able to heal and repair itself. In other words, if you're a little bit more into fight or flight, or stress response, in other words, or whether you're able to stay nicely in rest and digest. So we've got lots of different ways to measure the health of the body and of the nervous system. And then if it's appropriate and necessary, to figure out how do we use the nerve endings in the joints and muscles of the spine as a tool to correct these subluxations, then we would take some x-rays so that we could figure out how to do that best, right?
Right. So for anyone to understand, you know, what's the most important thing for me to do? Well, we can't tell you that here on this video. You have to come in and get the assessment, because what's important for you is what's currently going on in your life and your situation. Having that customized, having that tailored, and spending personal time so you can get your questions answered with someone who cares and has a passion for this and is absolutely studying this each and every day and experiencing it. That's the key. The people that I see that are most successful in life are the ones that leverage other people's talents, that utilize the expertise of someone, and ultimately, when they find value in something, they take action on it. So you get the $100 match of the $100 that you spend, so you're getting a $200 value, but what's your health really worth? What would it mean for you to go be proactive about this and discover that maybe there's a completely different trajectory in your life because you get it handled now and you don't have to deal with the sickness when you deal with healthcare? So anything you'd like to you know, say to the listeners and the viewers before we sign off?
Again, going back to when I was a kid, I started off the sickest kid in class. I very quickly became one of the healthiest kids in class. I haven't honestly missed a single day of work due to illness in 20 years. Now, I did have a motorcycle accident, damaged my knee, and I took 3 days off to try to help rehab my knee, and then I was pretty quickly back in. Our bodies are supposed to be able to heal and recover like that, but I know from talking with people, most people don't feel like that's the case for them anymore. They feel like they're showing their age, they don't feel like they can keep up with the pace of life anymore. And what I want you to realize and understand is that that's not the way it's just supposed to go. That's just not part of getting old. That's the result of problems in the body that haven't gotten taken care of and have had time to get worse. It's not about age, it's about time.
Got it.
Right? So I hope that kind of inspires some people to feel like maybe they don't have to just sit back and take it, but they can do something about it and start getting back some of the parts of life that they've been missing out on.
You're your greatest asset. Invest in yourself. Take care of yourself, because if you don't have the energy, if you haven't taken care of your body, I don't care how sharp of a thinker you are, I don't care about any other aspect of life, it all starts to deteriorate. You want better finances, you want better relationships, you got to take care of the relationship with yourself, and you've been given this opportunity, which a lot of the people never hear about or never discover, but the ones that do, myself included, and you especially when you talk about where you were versus where you are now, look, do this for yourself, give yourself this gift and those that you love. So follow the prompts below, follow the link, go ahead and redeem your gift, go ahead and redeem that investment and take care. All right.